Bayem Yem. Today's Tuesday, Monday. It's Vav Menachem. I wasn't here yesterday, so I do want to mention that yesterday was the Yahrtzeit of the AriZaL, the Lebedik Ari. You have to take up with Ariella, yeah? You have to speak to, what's your grandmother's name? Basanda Chama Basmin. But you have to talk to Ariella. Okay, anyway, yes, was AriZal's Yahrtzeit. And the Rebbe made a big deal out of the AriZaL. I believe there's a letter from the Rebbe from Tafshan Lamed Gimel, either Lamed Beis or Lamed Gimel, either 72 or 73, where the Rebbe writes that was 400 years since the Histalkus of the Ari. So we're quite close to 450 years since the AriZaL. And the AriZaL is called AriZaL Achai. And the idea of AriZaL Achai is quite similar to what you have in Hasidus. That the Baal Shem Tov used to call his Rebbe. The Baal Shem Tov had a Rebbe. His name was Achia Hashiloini. And the Baal Shem Tov used to call his Rebbe, Achia Hashiloini, Baal Achai. Baal Achai means Chaya Yechida. What does that mean? Most people, even tzaddikim, have a connection to their neshama through their guf. In other words, even tzaddikim, that were mezachach the guf, and mevader the guf, and mesaken the guf. So the guf is a keli for the eira neshama, but the neshama that reaches them is through the guf. Chaya Yechida has no part in the body that represents it. So neshama and the madreg of Chaya Yechida means he's relating to his neshama without any. The guf is not a master at all. The guf is not a limitation whatsoever, which makes it a whole nother level. This is a neshama of Atzilus. Atzilus is Chaya. And even higher than Atzilus, this is Yechida. And the AriZaL and the Achia Shiloini are called Baal Achai, AriZaL Achai, because this was their madrege. Now, what's the chiddush of such people? The chiddush of such people is that we can have from them Torah. Because when you have neshamas that are so high, the Rebbe spoke about this many times. It's brought in Hasidus. The AriZaL, there's a famous story. It's brought in a lot of Maimorei Hasidus, and it's actually explained in different ways that on some level seem contradictory. But the story was that AriZaL laid down for a Shabbos afternoon nap for 2 hours in Pashas Bolok. His brother-in-law walked into the cheder where AriZaL was sleeping. The Chafa, that AriZaL was asleep for 2 hours, the Dover ploy, and he saw that AriZal's mouth was moving. Maybe even his eyes were open. He was sleeping, but his mouth was moving. So he realized that AriZaL wasn't sleeping like I sleep and you sleep. It's sleep of big tzaddikim, which is the neshama eila l'mayla v'sheves l'chaim. The neshama goes up. So when AriZaL woke up, in quotes, his shvager, his brother-in-law, asked him, "What were you seeing in these 2 hours?" So there's two versions to the story. One version is that AriZaL said to him that in order for me to speak to you what I saw in these 2 hours would take 60 years of talking. And in the other case it was that in order for me to say to you what I just saw in these 2 hours would take 80 years of talking. In other words, this is a seichel, a level of re'iyah. So in 2 hours AriZaL saw what to explain it to another person would take decades, 60 years, 80 years. And we all know the story that Reb Chayim Vittal was one of the gedolim of his time. Reb Chayim Vittal had real smicha. I don't have time to tell you the story right now, but Reb Chayim Vittal got smicha like they gave him the times of the Beis HaMikdash. And Reb Chayim Vittal was the Talmid of the Ramak. And then when the AriZaL came to Tzfas, and the AriZaL was told Menachem that this is his primary Talmud, that the AriZaL has to give his Torah to Rachav. If he gives it to Reb Chayim Vittal, it'll stay for posterity because he'll be able to record it. The AriZaL couldn't write. The AriZaL could not be mitzamtzim himself enough into Ksav. His brain worked so fast he couldn't write. There is one sefer that we have. I have it in the house. Ksav Yad Kedesh AriZaL B'Yatzmi. The AriZaL wrote himself. It's a pirush on Sifra Ditzniusa, which is a part of Zohar, which he wrote when he was still in Mitzrayim. Right? The AriZaL was born in Yerushalayim. He was orphaned as a child. And his mother took him to Mitzrayim where she had a brother who was very wealthy. And AriZaL grew up there. AriZal did his boided was there. AriZal met Al-Yohan Navi for 7 years. He was in his boided in Mitzrayim. He married his first cousin. He married his mother's brother's daughter. And at the age of 30, he was told Menachem that it's Lech Lecha, it's time for him to move. And he came to Tzfas. When he came to Tzfas, the Ramak was still alive. When the Ramak passed away, the AriZaL was maspited. The AriZaL eulogized him. The famous Hesped, the Rebbe used to speak about this often on Hey Menachem. Ki yeh be'it ish chet mishpat moves v'talisa eisei al eitz. If a person is going to have a chet means a chesed, a lack. Mishpat moves, and the lack is going to result in the judgment of death. V'talisa eisei al eitz, and you'll blame it on the eitz adas tevara. In other words, that AriZaL said about the Ramak, he was a yid who was so whole and so perfect in every way that there should not have been any for Misa. Why was he in of Misa? Because of eitz adas. So the Rebbe said that in the Gemara you have Arba Shemesu Be'etye Shel Nochash. There are 4 who died from the Eitzah, from the counsel, from the suggestion, from the provocation of the Nochash HaKadmeni. And the Gemara lists 4 people who were perfect. All of them I don't remember, but one of them was Binyamin, Ben Yankiv, in other words, Yishai Avi David, Tilov Ben David, and the 4th I always forget. 4 people who had no Aveda whatsoever, and they only passed away Be'etye Shel Nochash, because of the Nochash HaKadmeni. So the Rebbe says, by those 4, the Gemara mentions the Nochash. That their death has to do with the serpent. By the Ramak, you don't even mention the Nochash, you just mention the Eitz, which is Das Tevara. It says in Tanya, based on the Zohar, that the Eitz Das Tevara is Kula Kedusha. It's the Mokar of Tevara, but itself is Kula Kedusha. So the Ramak's Misa is not even connected to Etye Shel Nochash. Like in the Gemara, it's and of course the Rebbe said, that when the AriZaL said this about the Ramak, he paskened about himself as well, that there's no Inyan of Misa by the AriZaL, because he had no Shaykhs to Chet Lashon Chesaron. His Neshama left this world, and his Guf was interred. The Teretz is, but Alisa Eisal Eitz, because of the Chet of Eitz Adas Tevara. So anyway, so the Ramak passed away, and AriZaL became the head of the kibbutz of Mekubalim and Sfas. It was a small group, it wasn't a large, it wasn't thousands of people, it was a few people who were Go'onim Adidim, Oivdei Lekim, Bepnimius, Ubetomim, on the highest Madregas. They were the class, they were the Talmidim of the Ari. And the AriZaL knew that he has to teach his Torah to the Rachav. And Rachav said, I don't understand. He was a Talmud of the Ramak. And the Ramak taught Seydis HaTorah, Kabbalah, but AriZal's Torah he couldn't understand. The Rebbe said once in a Fabrengen, I saw it in Teres Menachem, that if you could say about the Torah of Ramesha Cordova, the Mechaber, the Sefer Pardas Rimonim, that his Torah is Seydis HaTorah, Pnimius HaTorah, then you could say about the AriZaL who wrote the Sefer Eitz Chaim and Pri Eitz Chaim, that it's the Seydis of Teres HaRamak. It's Sod Shebes Sod. It's a secret within a secret. So the Chav Pasha didn't understand. So the story is, this is brought in the what's called Shivchei Hari, that on the Motzei Shabbos, the AriZaL took the Ramak in a rowboat into the Kinneret, where you have the Be'era Shel Milyam, like Rashi says in Chumash, and he drew a cup of water, and the AriZaL knew from where to take, and he gave Rachav to drink, and the Chav was Zoichen to drink from the Mayim of Be'era Shel Miriam, and his mind opened up, and he was able to understand the Torah of the AriZaL, and he wrote down the Divrei Hari. And the AriZaL used to be Mazia Zeya Gedel. AriZaL would exert himself, would work very, very hard to find words to be able to explain to the Rachav what he was thinking, and he couldn't possibly write it. He couldn't possibly write. His brain worked so fast and in such an abstract level, he couldn't put it into words. Reb Chayim Vittal was able to find written words like a Maturgiman, that from the spoken word of the AriZaL, and the spoken word of the AriZaL was a Mesiras Nefesh on the part of the AriZaL to be able to find language. And this is what I started saying, that sometimes you have a choch, and I tell you sosin the shokit v'shochich, and nothing comes out. A chochem, and nothing comes out. Like Yankiv Moshe Rabbeinu and the Stumu Yevinu Mayon is Chochma. It's hard to say that Moshe Rabbeinu loses something. It's the pshat, his Chochma became the madreg of Moshe didn't find words to talk to people. So when you talk about Yidden like the AriZaL and like Achia Shiloin, and you can say the same thing about the Baal Shem Tov and about the Alter Rebbe and about the Rebbe, the idea that they found words was pilaploim half of a fellow. Because they learned Torah. There's no oisies for it. They learned Torah in a level of oir. The Torah that they learned was not that they were smarter than us. They were quicker than us. They saw the Torah. They saw it. They visualized it. They didn't understand it. And when you see the Torah, you're seeing one achdus, one lattice, one panorama, one unity. And when you see Torah in that way, what do you teach your students? Your students can't see the picture you see. So you have to describe it. How do you describe a visual image in audible words? And it should be oiskahal. And what you communicate should be consistent with what you're seeing. Distortion is not a problem. And the Eibishter gave a special koyach to the AriZaL, that in spite of how great his hasaga was, he was able to find words. He was able to find words. And these words he spoke to his Talmidim, and specifically to Rabbi Menachem Vittal, which are recorded in the Kisvei AriZaL. And to a very, very great extent, that's the basis of Hasidus. There's a letter from the Baal Shem Tov. Which is printed, where the Baal Shem Tov is defending himself against a Gadol B'Yisrael who was objecting to the Shitas of Baal Shem Tov about Eined Mavadeh, about Tzimtzum Shalakim Pshutei. And the Baal Shem Tov writes to him, I don't understand. What is your objection? What is your criticism? Why do you have issue with the Torah that I'm teaching? The Torah that I'm teaching, that's based on the Yesod of I think that's the Lashon. Lei sasar ponui minei. There is no place where the Eibishter is. Afil b'makam hashba is based on the combined Kabbalah of the Ramak and the AriZaL. So the AriZaL, the greatness of the AriZaL is impossible to fathom. His mind, his mind, the kind of brain that he had. And I can be meidech in this. This is called Chochem be'etzem kei chachmaseh, and even higher than that. He understood things without questioning. He didn't have to ask questions to give answers. You know, the rule is that when you want to understand anything, the Gemara says, first it's dark and then it's light. First you don't know and then you know. Like the expression that the Welt says, the question of a smart person is the beginning of the answer. It's half the answer. So anybody who studies anything and asks questions, if he's an Amoritz, if he's Brust, if he's an ordinary person, Stam Makshna Moritz, he asks questions, Stam, for the sake of asking questions. Those questions have no value. And even if they have value, he doesn't understand the question that he's asking, and he's certainly not going to understand the answer. But a Chocham, that means someone who's trained in Chochma, who has experience and a background and a history in Chochma, when he has a question, that question is the opening of a door to an answer. The question is half an answer. So G'dei Yisrael, who are learning Chochmas HaTorah, they look at the letters of the Sefer Torah and they ask questions. Why is it written like this? Every question is the beginning of an answer. It's a door. But you have the Chazal say that b'teraseh shel Meir hayakosov kosnois oyer b'yal. But a Meir had a Sefer Torah, and in the Sefer Torah, when it describes the shirt that the Eibishter made for Adam Rishon, it doesn't say kosnois er ba'ayin, which means with an animal skin or with a fur of some sort. But kosnes er b'yalef, the tunic that the Eibish made for Adam Rishon, was a kosnes, a shirt of light, oil with an aleph. But there are such Yidden like the Rabbi, like the AriZaL, like Achi Ashiloini, like the Baal Shem Tov. They didn't have kashas. They looked at the Sefer Torah and they saw oil, they saw lichtigkeit. No, so if a person learns Torah, there's no kashas. Every time he opens Sefer Torah, he sees light. He could look at the words Breishis Bara today and see one light. He could look at the words Breishis Bara tomorrow and see a different light. Like it says in Tikkun Ezeh, there's 72 different translations of the pasuk. When a person has Torah, but he has access to the true inyan of Arucham Eretz Mida Urachava Mina Yov, the idea that the Torah is infinite. Now, so if a person is in such a Baal Madrege, for him it's Gvaldik. But what do we have from him? A person who looks at the Torah and he sees Oira Torah, what do we have from him? So there's a lot of explanations. There's Avedis HaYochid and Tzadik is Megan HaKalader Kulei. But we need Torah. We need Torah. And the meaning of the word Torah is Torah v'lilmed ani tzarech. The meaning of the word Torah is that we're able to understand it. And that's the Chiddush of the AriZaL. How many Yidden were there in history like the AriZaL? We look at Heilig Sfarim. They describe Mr. Shelach was such a neshama. Chanoich was such a neshama. Adam, they were such big chachomim. They understood the Torah in such a high madrege, but nobody could benefit from their Torah because they didn't know how to speak the Torah in the language. The Chiddush of the AriZaL was that the Eibishter gave him words. Not written words, but spoken words. And again, it says in the Kisvei AriZaL that AriZaL it was very hard for him to bring the ideas that he saw into a language that people were able to understand. But he exerted himself. Why? Because the Eibishter gave him a rachav, you know, the Eibishter gave him Reb Chayim Vittal. The Rebbe once said this. The Rebbe once said this, Simchas Torah, I happened to be here, so it must have been Mem Zayin. It was only Simchas Torah Babringen, Lel Simchas Torah that I attended, where the Rebbe discussed the Inyan HaTorah. And the Rebbe said every Gili of Torah has two people. You have Moshe Rabbeinu and you have Yeshua. You have the AriZaL and you have the Ramak. You have the Baal Shem Tov and the Messenger, Magid. And I believe he gave another example. Every Gili of Torah involves two people. Why? Because when one teaches it, it's not yet in the world until one person understands. One. But one is enough. When one person brings the Torah of the Rebbe into the world, now it's available. And he can bring it to other people, they should be able to understand it as well. In other words, if not for the Rachav, I think it says Befedish, that if not for the Neshama of Reb Chayim Vittal, there would be no point, or at least no benefit, of the Neshama of the AriZaL being in this world, because he would be a Chocham, Sosim, the Shokit, B'Shachich, he's sealed off, he might as well be a mute. He would have no ability to communicate his Chochma in a way that what we would get would be Taka his Chochma, on the one hand, and on the other hand, we'll be able to understand it. And that's, so to speak, the matana of the AriZaL. The Eibishter put the neshama of the AriZaL into this world, and he gave him Talmidim. And we don't know, there may have been many people like Ari before, but if they didn't have a Talmud that could write down his teachings and preserve them, and bring them down to a madrege where at least the biggest chachamim in the world should be able to understand a little bit of Teraseh Shel Ari, the Ari would have lived, the Ari would have passed away, and it would be like he never was here. Because we'd have no gain from him. And of course, we all know that the AriZaL said, and it's written in his, whatever it is, in Rai Mehemne, in the Sforim that are based on the Rai Mehemne, that even though that for so long it was a big sakona to be Megale Seder Satera, the AriZaL writes, Muter u mitzvah legal zeis hachach mitzvah u muter legal zeis hachach. By the end of time, it's permitted, and it's, I think it's in the Akdama, in the Rachav's Akdama, Shara Akdamis. Muter, they've never printed in the back of the Kuntet Chaim. It's mitzvah u muter legal zeis hachach. Now it's permitted, and it's a mitzvah to reveal Seder Satera. And of course, it says in Zohar. This Zohar everybody knows. This sefer of Zohar, which Reb Shimon Yochai, he also didn't write it. Reb Shimon Yochai didn't write the Zohar. The Zohar was written by his sefer. Reb Shimon Yochai had a scribe. His name was Rabbi, and he wrote Tifri Rashbi, including what the Reb Shimon wrote. There's a description of Reb Shimon passing away. Reb Shimon could not have written a description of how he passed away, even though in Chumash you have Moshe Rabbeinu describing the description of how he passed away, and there's a machlekes in the Gemara. How could Moshe Rabbeinu write Vayamas Sham Moshe? How could Moshe Rabbeinu write Vayamas Sham Moshe? There's an opinion that says that Yeshua wrote it, and there's another opinion that Moshe Rabbeinu Kosav B'dema, he wrote it with tears. But we don't say that about Reb Shimon, that he wrote the Zohar and described his own Ptira, his own Histalkus B'dema, with tears. It was written by his Talmidim, but Rabbi, his Sefer. And Reb Shimon Yochai was told that B'hai Chibur of the Loch, the Sefer Azeh, the Shoydis HaTorah, Pnimiyis HaTorah, Yifkun b'nei Yisam begalusa barachim. You didn't go out of galus with ahava. The meaning of the word rachimim and zayir means ahava. This is the gift of the AriZaL, and it's true. It's really true that by Hasidim, by Hasidus, including in Hasidus Chabad, although there's many things in Hasidus Chabad that do not say in Kisvei AriZaL, but it's by us it's accepted that AriZaL is the Poisek Achen in Kabbalah. By us, the Kabbalah of the Ari is final. It's not necessarily the Kabbalah of Rachav. There's other Talmidim of the Ari, and our Rabbeim have a Maseidah going back to the Baal Shem Tov. Some in Yorim of Kabbalah were Makabah from the Nechavedim, from other Talmidim of the AriZaL, even though the AriZaL said that the only one who has a right to write down his Torah is Reb Chayim Vittal, and none of the other Talmidim should write. Some of the Talmidim did write, and in our Kabbalah, in the Kabbalah which is brought in Chassidus Chabad, there are inyonim which are from the AriZaL, but not from Reb Chayim Vittal, from other Talmidim, from Nemek HaMelech, from Yitzchak Struga. I don't know what I'm talking about. I'm just saying the whole. It sounds good. I don't understand myself what I'm saying, but this is what the Rebbe has in his letters. But the Teiras Hari is emes, and there's a letter in the Sefer Beis Rebbe where the Alter Rebbe was writing about a debate with the Vilner Gaon, the Gra. So he explains why he can't have a debate with him. So Benegeh to Nigle, he gave one reason why he can't have a debate with him. And Benegeh to Kabbalah, The AriZaL gave a different reason why you can have a debate with the Gra, with the Vilna Gaon. He says because Atzleinu is makubal. By us in Chasidim it's accepted that kol divrei ha'ari mipi Eliyahu, that every single word of AriZaL is emes, it's Eliyahu and Rabbi. It's not open to debate. And by him it's Shmu Azu no, Shmu Azu Eine no. He accepts the AriZaL as a great makubal and so on and so forth, but he doesn't consider him a makubal on a madrege where he can't disagree. So there is how can I have a debate with a Yid in Kabbalah if we disagree about the definition of truth? It's not shaykhs that we should have a debate. That's how important the AriZaL is in the Derech HaChasidus. By Chasidim, he's mamish a pesach achan. The Rebbe often or occasionally, when he would talk about the Rabbeim, he would list all the Rabbeim, he would go backwards, the Friedrich Rebbe, and so on, the Baal Shem Tov, the AriZaL, Rashbi, Moshe Rabbeinu. He would mention the AriZaL. The AriZaL is very, very, very important in Chassidus Chabad. What is Chassidus? What's Kabbalah? What's Kabbalah? What's Kabbalah? It's Torah without a Yetzer Hara. That's what it is. It's Torah Oir. It's Torah without a Yetzer Hara. It's Torah without Choshech. And of course the question becomes, when you have a Torah that doesn't talk to the Yetzer Hara, when you have a Torah that doesn't talk to challenges, how practical is it? It's not practical at all. And it's not practical. And the kasha is a double kasha. If Kabbalah is a Torah, it's a Torah which speaks lichtigkeit, above Yetzer Hara, above darkness, the generations before us were far more deserving of this Torah than we are, and they weren't zeichet to have it. So why is it being given to us when we're on so much a lower level? And of course the answer is, as we know, we were not given Seder Satera because we're more deserving than earlier generations. We were given Seder Satera, there's two reasons. There's two reasons. One reason is a positive reason. Because of Tameh Chayim Zachu, right, that AriZaL brings, and that Magdavram Paskins, that before Shabbos, you have to taste the Bacholei Shabbos, the food of Shabbos. Mashiach is Shabbos. Or whatever Mashiach means. And Mashiach comes, we're all going to be learning Seder Satera. Kulam Yedu Eisi. Right? Lo Yilam Du Eidish Yisrael, Kulam Yedu Eisi. Lo Yeisa Kol Eilam Kul Al Hashem B'Vadam. Molo Ha'oras De'ez Havaya Kamayim L'Yom HaChasim. The whole world is going to be Da'asas Hashem. When Mashiach comes, we'll all be on a madreg of Kabbalah, on a madreg where we could see, not just hear. Yeah? So the AriZaL says that Erev Shabbos, you have to taste the foods of Shabbos. So the access to Chochmas of Kabbalah, Chochman is taught in the last generations, is the taste of the foods of Shabbos. But there's the other reason, and this is the more practical reason. And that is the story with the Mizitcher Magid and the Alter Rebbe and the Pinchas Koritzer about the Even Tev Shebekeser HaMelech. If you have a crown, and at the base of the crown you have a stone which is unbelievably precious. And if you keep the stone and the crown, you'll keep the crown together. And there'll be a great honor for the king. But the king's son will die and that'll be the end of it. And you make the common sense decision to destroy the crown, extract that stone, grind it up into a powder, and all the while the son is dying. And you hope maybe you'll keep him alive. We are the son of the king. And the Seder Satera that were given to us in a way that we don't begin to understand. We don't begin to understand. The Tashtapechna Avnei Kodesh Bereish Kol Chutzes. What if 100 years before would have been considered the biggest Chilul Hashem, the biggest desecration of God's name, to take the deeper secrets of the Torah and roll them in the streets for abivednikis, for nobodies, to learn secrets of Torah that the greatest tzaddikim, the Tanoim and the Amiroyim and the Savaroyim, the Goinim and the Rishonim and the early Achrenim were not able to learn. And to us it was given with such a shefa. It's not because we're more worthy, because it's poshit, a question of pikuach nefesh. You're going to keep the crown intact and the son is going to die. What's to happen for them? Like we all know that the Rebbe used to say all the time. The Rebbe was visited by many Gedei Yisrael. Chassidish Gedei Yisrael and Misnagdish Gedei Yisrael, Ashkenazish Gedei Yisrael and Sfadish Gedei Yisrael. One of the questions the Rebbe would often ask them is, do you have ksovim from your parents and your grandparents? Usually if you're a Gadol Yisrael, your father was also, do you have manuscripts from your father and your grandfather? And they would say, yeah. And say, why don't you print them? So invariably they would say, because it's not our derech, it's not our custom to print. And the Rebbe would say, you can hold these manuscripts in a closet. You're not going to print them. There's going to come a tomorrow that not only no one's going to be interested in them, no one's even going to know how to read them. What are you holding them for? Yeah, there was a time, there was a place where in Chabad also, the Ksavim were a secret. The Eitzer HaMelech, Chassidim had no idea the treasure of Maimonides Chassidus that were kept by all the Rabbeim beginning with the Alter Rebbe. And then the Rebbe went ahead and printed them all. Why? Because what are you going to hold them for? For a time when no one's even going to know how to read them? You have to be mefarsim them. It's a futsam and a sechutz. I'm just reading now inside, yeah, where the Rebbe is talking about Lubavitch doing things in a way of breitkeit, big buildings. This is the sikha that we're supposed to learn today, which we're not learning. And people are saying, what? It's Baal Shem Tov is such a holy thing. How could you put him into the street? And the Rebbe says the Baal Shem Tov said Mashiach's not coming till the futsam and a sechutz. So what do you think? He meant in a shtibel in Williamsburg? Has to be in the street. It has to be on a worldly level, which means you have to build, like the Rebbe is saying in the Sikha, we'll have to learn it tomorrow. You build buildings and you make a big tumult because that's the way you reach the world. That's how you bring the fountains of Hasidus to the world. And AriZaL in a significant way is the beginning of this. AriZaL in a significant way was the beginning of the revelation of Seder Satera. Now again, I want to go back to my question. A Torah that speaks above the Yetzer Hara, mamish, is not helpful to people who are so entrapped by the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara confuses us, the Yetzer Hara tempts us, the Yetzer Hara compromises us, the Yetzer Hara drags us down. You're going to shine a light, speak about holy things. So two possibilities are possible. Number one, you're not going to relate to it at all. And number two, you're going to develop a fantasy that you're above the Yetzer Hara, and it's all it is. It's an empty fantasy, it's a trip, it's an experience. You go away from the reality and you think you're a big tzaddik. And the minute you return to the reality, you have a Yetzer Hara, and you have a Nefesh Abahamis, and you have a Gashmis, and you have a Chumris, and you have Allah in Yonim. All those things that make life difficult for us. What's the teretz? Chassidus requires avodah, no question. Certainly in Chassidus Chabad there has to be avodah. But if you don't have the oira Chassidus, you don't have the joy and the light, and that's really the right words, the joy and the light that learning the Shmosa de Eraisa brings to a person, you're not going to have the cheshik and the chayis to fight with the Yetzer Hara. It says in Kuntas Eitz HaChaim, the Rebbe Rashab wrote a Kuntas. And it's called Kuntas Eitz HaChaim. The Rebbe actually gave it to all of us, each one of us. And the Kuntas Eitz HaChaim revolves around the simple question. Even if people are going to learn Chassidus, shouldn't they learn only those in Yonam of Chassidus that they can relate to on a level of Avodah? Like Yehuda Tato, the lower Achtas, Bittul Hayesh, the lower Bittul, Iskafia, fighting with the Yetzer Hara. Why do we learn about the higher Yichud, the Bittul B'Metzias, and his Habcha? These Madregas are not Kerkein. So the Rebbe answers the question. Because when a person has to fight, the fight needs a motivation. And the motivation for the fight is the light. Is the concept that there's a place which is above the fight. Even if he or she is going to remain Kol Yomo B'Mulchama, his whole life is going to be fighting with the Yetzer Hara. He's never going to be rid of the Yetzer Hara. But when he tastes Eitz HaChayim, when he tastes the tree of life, when he tastes the oil and the chayis of Pnimis HaTeira, the neshama of Teira, which speaks directly to the neshama of Ayid. So if you have no Yetzer Hara, if you're one of those rare souls who's above that whole business, or you've raised yourself above it, so Chassidus brings a person to a place of Dveikas and Pnimis and Elokus. Without Chassidus, it would not be possible. But Anoshim Kerkeinu, people have Yetzer Haras and have all the challenges that we have. What does Chassidus do for us? It brings holy light and holy joy into our life. Now, if we could stay there, we'll be Bailei Tshuva, we'll be Anoshim Pshutim, that the Pshitas of Ish Pasha touch of the Pshitas of Atzmas Ein Sof. But even if we cannot stay there, the light of Chassidus motivates our avodah. Our fight with the Yetzer Hara is a different fight because there's simcha in our life. And there's light in our life. And that simcha and that light, this is the gift of the Baal Shem Tov. This is the gift of the Alter Rebbe. Taking the Seder Satera, which the AriZaL expounded and revealed. That to understand the AriZal's teachings and to live by the AriZal's teachings, you have to be Reb Chayim Vittal. You have to be, you have to be one of those special people who's at an incredibly high level that has the shaykhs to Eira Torah, to the light of the Torah, the light of the Torah is, which begins when you're a tzaddik. Maybe when you're a tzaddik gomer, but not a beinani or a revolving door Baal Tshuva, like I call it. For us, Chassidus is life itself. Why? Not because it takes away the Yetzer Hara. It motivates the fight with the Yetzer Hara. The Baal Shem Tov taught, you want to win the Yetzer Hara, the best way to do it is to raise up above the Yetzer Hara. And you raise it above the Yetzer Hara with simcha. You raise yourself above the Yetzer Hara with a relationship with a tzaddik, with a rebbe, which is of course the very essence of Chassidus. You raise yourself above the fight with the Yetzer Hara by learning Chassidus and experience. I once heard and I don't remember from whom, but I heard it from somebody who would know. I heard it from somebody who would know, that the Rebbe spoke to the Bochrim a lot, obviously. He spoke to everybody a lot, spoke to the Bochrim a lot also. And the Rebbe spoke to the Bochrim of how important it is they should keep Sidrei Yeshiva, they keep the Seder of the Yeshiva. That in the morning you learn Chassidus, and in the morning for Seder you learn Gemara, and in the afternoon Seder you learn whatever you learn in the afternoon Seder, and Halacha, and at night you learn again Chassidus. But the Rebbe said, and what about outside this Dorim? Outside this Dorim you also have to learn Torah. The only thing is you get to choose what. And the Rebbe said a Bocher has to have a Mokem Shali Bechofetz. Every Bocher has to have his favorite part of Torah. If a person learns Torah with Kabbalah Seil, it's no good. Torah, mitzvah is to do with Kabbalah Seil. Torah you have to learn because you have a geschmack in it. As I state in the Gemara, everybody has to learn Torah in the beginning, Shalei Lishma. You must. You have to go through that step of learning Torah when it's Torah Hashem before it becomes Torah Seil. You have to learn Torah because you like it. And you have to have a portion of Torah which is favorite to you. So the Rebbe said every Bocher needs to have a Liebe Chofetz. Und ich will, the Rebbe said, as the Liebe Chofetz von a Bocher soll sein in Chassidus. I would like that the Bocher's favorite area should be Chassidus. So the Rebbe didn't say, learn Chassidus even though it's not a Liebe Chofetz because I said so. It has to be your Liebe Chofetz. You have to actually enjoy and desire to spend your, quote, free time learning Pimis HaTorah. But if you don't enjoy it, don't do it. So somebody once told the Rebbe, that in the context of this conversation, this goes back to the 50s, before I was born, when the Rebbe spoke about, the Rebbe made the Shiva Knei HaMenera in Nigla and Chassidus, and he spoke about the idea of Liebe Chofetz, that a Bocher has to learn Torah where his desire is. So a Bocher told the Rebbe that he doesn't enjoy Chassidus. And the Rebbe said, Chassidus you don't enjoy? How could you not enjoy Chassidus? If you tell me you don't enjoy Halacha, you tell me to enjoy blood Gemara. The Rebbe said it was mishtoimim. How could a human being not have pleasure from Chassidus? Now I don't know how you understand the pshat in this kasha, yeah, but the Rebbe said, how could it be? Chassidus is such a rich and delightful limud. It's an edel limud. It's a fine limud. It's a limud which doesn't really teach. It only suggests, like a chacham u'mevim midait. You almost have to come to it by yourself. But Chassidus brings into the mind of a person, even a mind on our levels, light and soul and joy. And it's not avoida. It's not avoida. You can't serve Hashem by being intoxicated. You serve Hashem by fighting with the Yetzer Hara. But Chassidus give the light. So yesterday was the Yahrtzeit of the Ari, and of course the Rebbe spoke so many times that the Kol Chayav Avedose should over Kol Meshach Mechayev is Eil Lamayel Apel Yishot Kenavaritz. The day of the Stalkos of a Tzaddik is like the Shabbos of a lifetime. The whole life, Shabbos, the whole world goes up for a week. When a person passes away, the whole life of the person experiences an aliyah. And then it's Paltiel Shuis B'Kavaritz. It brings additional light into the world. And the inyan of the AriZaL is muter or mitzvah legal zeisa chochma. The inyan of the Ari is to bring into the world Torah oil, the Torah of light, the Torah of joy, which in our time, this is in Chassidus and specifically in Chassidus Chabad, we're the beneficiaries of it. We're zoiche to have it. And David has to give us a little seichel that we shouldn't just take it for granted. We shouldn't take it for granted. We should appreciate the gift that we have, and we should be Chassidim as we're supposed to, and we should be zeicha to the time when it's not Tayameh Chayim Zochu, but Stakeh Chayim Zochu. Okay, good morning. Yeah, I wasn't planning on doing this, but it happened. Azay das getroffen.